Right, good evening everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday night of Holy Week. I hope that you're all keeping safe and keeping sane. Hang in there in the lockdown, you can do this. As we start tonight's meditation, I want you to think about what is it that you are afraid of? What things really scare you? Is it a noise in the night? I know in the office, quite often I'll hear a scream come from Michelle's office because there's some snake or bug that's flown in. So I know she's quite scared about that. I know some of us in the congregation are scared of moths. Sorry, Paul, had to let that out there. I realized very early in my marriage that if I wanted to stay married to Claire, I wasn't allowed to give her frights anymore because she just didn't like the whole feeling of being scared all the time, having someone jump out and shout boo or anything like that. But I want you to think about what is it that you are scared of, what makes you afraid, and how do you react to that feeling of fear. So tonight, as we continue to work through the last 24 hours of Jesus' life, we take a look at Jesus being condemned by the righteous. And so I'm going to read Mark chapter 14, verses 53 to 65. You might want to pause the video and turn there yourself. Otherwise, you can just follow with me as I read the passage. So Mark chapter 14, verses 53 to 65. Jesus before the Sanhedrin. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders of the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they didn't find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, "I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and 3 days I will build another not made with human hands." Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is the testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," Jesus said, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "We do not need any more witnesses." Why? We do not need any more witnesses, he asked. "We have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him, and they beat him. And we give thanks to God for his word to us this evening. So, we've come from the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus has been arrested, and after midnight, he's taken into the house of the high priest. Now, the Sanhedrin was a council of about 71 elders, considered to be the most devoted and devout and wise in the community. And in Jesus' time, they ruled over the religious affairs of the people. They were men who devoted themselves entirely to the work of God. And the Sanhedrin's high priest was the leading religious figure of their time. Now, the Sanhedrin normally met during the day and in the temple courts. And the fact that they're gathering here in the middle of the night at midnight and at the high priest's palace gives us a sense that there's something not right going on here. Perhaps there's a sense of urgency or maybe secrecy, but something isn't normal. So let's just stop here for a moment and take some time to understand the full impact of the tragic irony that is taking place here. As Christians, we believe that Jesus is the Son of God sent to us. He is the Emmanuel. Perhaps, like in many of our tales, like the emperor who puts on plain clothes and walks among the people to learn who the people are and to be close to them. So here is Jesus, God who walks among us in the flesh. He's among the people undercover. He's healing the sick. He's feeding the hungry, forgiving sinners. He's showing compassion to the lost. And he's teaching people about what God is really like. And then through him doing all of this, it's not the sinners who get upset. It's the so-called religious, the upright, the wise, who have him arrested. The people you most expect to recognize the Messiah are the very ones who are blind to who he is, the ones who are the most infuriated with what it is that Jesus is doing. It's the righteous ones who are supposed to be set apart to stand for God, who in the end put God on trial. So the question we must ask is, how could this happen? Here we have 71 men devoted to God. They are the pillars of the community. And even if they did think that Jesus was a false prophet, what would make them finally behave in the way that they did? They blindfold him, they spit on him, they beat him over the head, they ridicule and they mock him. Shouldn't we expect more of these men? What is it that's making them act like this? Well, I think at the end of the day, the thing that's driving them here is it's really fear. These people are scared. They are afraid of what Jesus is doing. They're afraid that if we follow through with where Jesus is going, it might mean an end to the whole way that their life is set up. Fear is a big thing, isn't it? I don't think we fully realize how much fear plays a part in our lives, how massively fear impacts us in the way that we do things. If you think about it, we're all born afraid. It's probably a God-given mechanism, this self-preservation that helps us avoid danger and maybe jump out of trouble if we have to. But the problem is that this ingrained fear, the self-preservation, is often coupled with our sinful nature, our sinful instinct. So we learn quickly how to twist things in our favor. We can make a bad thing look good, or turn something into our own benefit and be able to avoid something that's scary. We make excuses for not doing what we know we should, because we're scared that if we do that, maybe people will say something, or we're scared that if we try this, we might fail. And so in the end, our lives are just ruled by fear, and they aren't ruled by truth. They aren't ruled by what is right. I'm sure that among those 71 men, there must have been some of them who must have been thinking to themselves, wait a minute, hold on, is this how we act? Is this who we are? Should we be doing these things? But there's nothing in any of the Gospels that accounts for not even one of them that speaks out. Only Joseph of Arimathea protests at Jesus being sentenced to death. But there's nothing else really in there. If I'm honest, I've seen this kind of fear in myself. These times when I know what the right thing is to do, but I'm too scared to speak out against the evil. Sometimes something will happen, and then afterwards I'll catch myself saying, man, I really should have said something there. Why did I keep silent? What would have happened if one or two of those Sanhedrin leaders would have just said, wait, hold on, what's going on here? This isn't what God called us to. Even if Jesus is a false prophet, surely we should keep in with what with what God teaches us. In our own situations, you and I must be able to at some point say, wait, This is not right. So in the middle of all this trial, they're trying to find witnesses to show that Jesus has blasphemed and has claimed to be God. But they can't find any two witnesses that will testify because none of their stories add up. Surely this would have been another sign for these Sanhedrin leaders that something isn't quite right here. Surely some kind of alarm bell should have been ringing for them there. But as a last resort, they finally confront Jesus himself and they just bluntly ask him, are you saying that you think you are God? Because surely if they ask him this, who in their right mind in that situation would implicate themselves? So they flat out ask him, are you the Messiah? And Jesus' reply just leaves me so challenged and perhaps found out as the fearful doubter that I am. You see, because Jesus in that moment, he doesn't back down. He doesn't think, all right, what good is it if they kill me now? Why don't I just say whatever I need to get myself out of this situation so that I can get through today and live to fight another day. And I'm just so grateful that in the midst of all of that intimidation, in that fearful setting, with the onslaught of a beating and the end of his life, right there in that fearful moment, Jesus chooses to stand for what's true. He doesn't change his tack. He keeps true to himself. And he answers in this incredibly powerful way. He says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Whoa, how hectic is that? Jesus, without hatred or fear, but with conviction and authority, speaks with truth. In the ears of those elders who were sitting there must have been some powerful movement. There must have been just a glimpse of a possibility of thinking, maybe he is who he says he is. I believe that moment would have been so powerful that it could have even been a conversion moment for them, a sudden realization. But they, like us, were so afraid and so bent on protecting what is that they use it as the last thing they need to get what they want and preserve the way that things are. So I think this encounter just leaves us with a few questions. In what areas of your life are you the wise and the righteous? Where do you need to courageously stand for what is true or for those who are vulnerable? And is there possibly a movement of God that you are resisting in your life because you're afraid of what will happen to the way things are if you finally just surrendered yourself and did what it is that God's asking you to do? Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for your steadfast love in every circumstance. You simply stand for love and truth all the time. Forgive us for when we see what is right, but out of fear or self-preservation, choose to allow sin to continue. It is our sin that put you on the cross. It is our failure to stand for what is right that causes so much pain and brokenness in this world. Forgive us, Lord. Give us eyes to see and a heart to follow. You are the great I am, the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Amen.